Thank you, Brian. That was great. Hello, everyone. Happy, Thursday? Happy Thursday. How's the week been? Good. Have you been here all week, or is this the first day you're coming together? First day? Oh, wow, that's awesome. So I get to meet with you while everyone's like excited and refreshed and raring to go. That's fantastic. I love that. And I love seeing people back in a room again. You know, we did this last year, and it was through a Zoom call. That was just so painful, right? Because it's like one way, and you're just speaking, and you're going, is there, like, give me a sign of life on the other side. Raise a hand, smile, do something. So I love this. And I love that we're a small, intimate group. We're going to have a great conversation. I loved everything Brian said. Thank you for that great introduction, Brian. And I want to touch on two things you say before we talk more about customer success. One, plus one to what Brian said about this being such a new emerging discipline for us. It's a mission, it's very rare to find disciplines that are mission critical, but are still new, that we can shape and evolve, right? Decades from now, you will be the leaders in customer success and talk about, remember that time when I wrote that job rec, right? So that's very exciting. If you are a builder, and I'm one, it's a very exciting time to be here because you get to create your destiny. You get to determine what good, what great looks like, as Brian said, and then work towards that. So that's very exciting for me. It's one of the reasons I do what I do today. The second thing I love about that is there is not one single definition of what good looks like, right? Each one of you raised your hands for different things. I love it. I kept my hand down for all of them because I don't have a retention quota. I don't have a churn number to measure against. I might have an NPS on a good day. More seriously, we work, for me, my customers' goals are my goals. So each one of my teams takes on our customers' goals. Let's pick on Eric for a minute. Eric, do you work for Zonos? And what would be a Zonos priority for this year? Just give me one. Make one up if you cannot share it publicly. NRR, great. So if Zonos cares about NRR, and we say one way to expand net retention revenue is to perhaps build an AI/ML tool that will help our customer engagement be sticky, then that is the goal that your AWS Customer Solutions Manager, the customer success role for AWS, will take on. And at the end of the year, if we meet the goal, the CSM is rewarded. If we don't meet the goal, guess what happens? So for me, my customers' goals are my goals, which makes it incredibly liberating because we are always, you do the right thing by the customer without really having to think about guardrails internally. But it's different for every segment. When I did customer success for large enterprise customers like Walmart, that's a different model than doing it for small and medium business, than doing it for games customers, right? Like, what does gamification look like is very different than what private equity-owned company would want. So there are as many different flavors as companies, and it's up to us to determine what good looks like for each one of those models. We'll go into all of that in a minute. As Brian said, I'm Harini Gokul. I lead customer success for our next generation of customers at AWS. Before that, I did this for Microsoft. My portfolio includes, I'm honored and privileged to have like the world's largest scaling startups, among others, as part of my portfolio. I learn from them every day. We are working with many of them on what good looks like, and I'm here to share some thoughts, what I would do with my team. Does that sound like a good use of the next 30 minutes for us? Okay. Let's see. What do you want me to use to move it forward?
Big green button.
The big green button. Let's see if it works.
The big one up top?
Okay. So I was coming into this discussion. We are going into mid-year. The year started with a bang in many different ways. And I'm sitting in June, July, thinking about what has been the first 6 months of my year? And I was trying to think of a visual I could use. And this massive wave and set of waves is really what came to mind. And some of that is because of this. So if you look left to right, there are 3 indices on this chart. The first one is the Bessemer Venture Index. As many of you know, it tracks the top 100 software companies and the growth of those companies. It's a NASDAQ index. The second thing, which you're more familiar with and possibly don't want to see, is the S&P index, right? If you thought about where we started last year, 2021, yes, there was the pandemic. Yes, we had to do more Zoom calls than we ever wanted to. But if you were in the tech business, it was a pretty banner year. If you had an IPO, it was probably a blowout IPO. We had more M&A activity than we've ever had. If you took the market cap of all your public software companies, take a guess what the number looked like. Throw a number out. $5 trillion? 50 trillion? I love that. That's where we're going. 50 trillion. It was 2.7 trillion. So closer to the 5 number, but still incredible amounts of growth, right? And then Jan happened. Some geopolitical updates happened in the world around us. Macroeconomic signals started to come home to roost. Interest rates rose, inflation rose, the cost to drive to work increased. And with all of that, we are in the middle of change. We're in the middle of, depending on where you sit, you're in the middle of a downturn, or you're in the middle of just an incredibly ambiguous moment, right? I have a number of customers say, I know you don't have a crystal ball, but let me ask you in anyways. And we don't have crystal balls. But what we do have are our customer interests at heart, right? And I think in this moment of change and uncertainty is when roles like ours shine. Because we are part of what is important for the customer. We're focused on the fundamentals of a customer's journey. We're focused on what is required to help them get value and get value more efficiently and think through their path forward as they go through the next 2+ years of change and ambiguity and questions. And I love this role that we're in because we have an opportunity to step up, play with the team, but step up to make sure that our customers are still realizing time to value in an accelerated fashion because their CFOs and their customers are expecting that. I've had more CFO conversations these past few weeks than I've had in years. Continue to adopt products so they can make the best use of their resources. And then finally, innovate, because this is an offense play. It's not just defense. Yes, you're going to focus on costs. Yes, you're going to focus on value. And yes, you're going to continue to innovate because that's what is important as you come out of this. And your customers will remember who were with them when they went through this period of change and what was the partnership that you created with them. It's what I think about every day. How am I going to show up for my customer to help them realize these objectives? And it comes to 3 things. It's always about value, and we'll talk a little bit about that, right? How do you realize and address customer value? And some of that is fundamental. You do it every day, and you're like, I do this. And if you do, I want to hear about it. The second thing is scale. Efficient growth. Yes, you're helping driving value and growth, but how do you do it in a way that's most efficient? I have that question. I get asked the question a lot. And that's all as much about a customer being efficient. So how can I best help them invest so they're making the best use of their talent as it is about me? How am I making the best use of my customer success teams? Am I thinking about automation the right way? Am I scaling the right way? Or am I doing once and done mechanisms that may not scale? So it's forcing me to take a deeper look at how I do business, at how I engage with customers. And both of those together help me think about what I need to do to look around the corner. If you've ever heard me speak, being proactive, I think, and driving for growth is the #1 thing for customer success. It's how we earn trust. It's how we earn a seat at the table by helping the customer think about what comes ahead. So I never take my eye off the ball. Yes, I'm going to help you be efficient, grow efficiently, and I'm going to help you come out of this in a way that is vastly superior to where you started. Here are the 8 questions I ask, and I'll share them, and I'm curious what else you would ask. So at the end of this, we'll stop, we'll pause, and have a conversation about it. The first one is you start with the customer value. And by customer value, I don't mean here's more of SageMaker I'm going to sell you because it makes sense to me. It means truly sitting down with a pen and paper or a notepad and asking your customer, what does good look like when we are successful? And you get the most interesting responses, right? You get responses like, I want to increase my NRR. I had a food delivery startup, one that we've all used in the past 2 years. And they said, we are noticing, we have customers on our app, we have customers on a competitor's app, and we're noticing that our customers are switching. And they switch because there is a millisecond of latency between a drop-down on my app versus my competitor's app. I care that my customer picks me. Help me fix that. So that's the second question. You care about your customer. They care about their customer. So start with the end in mind and work backwards. The third thing, and this is always important, but especially important now. Who are the folks at the table? And not everybody at the table will necessarily sort of be there visible to you, right? So give me a few roles you work with. Who do you work with every day? Product managers, okay? Sales. At your customer? Who do you work with at your customer? Company owners, love that. I heard something in the back. CFO, I love that. CFO, she's already on it.
Plant engineers.
Plant engineers. Oh, I want to learn more about your business. Plant engineers. So the folks sort of on the floor doing the work, the line of business. And those are all the right roles, right? You want to work with people who own the business because you're helping them get value from your service or product. But there are roles like the CFO that the lady at the back mentioned that I traditionally don't engage with regularly. I have a core set of stakeholders, CEO, CPO, so product owners, your engineering VPs of engineering, your director of infrastructure, the guy who manages the data center for you, you know. But the CFO doesn't normally make my list, and I've learned to fix that over the past few months. Because his role, his, her, or their role, has become disproportionately important as they are scrutinizing every line item, looking at the bottom line, thinking about where they can optimize. You want to be there, a partner with them, showing them how you can help optimize, showing them how you bring value in ways more than one. The other role I've come to recognize and pay attention to are your investors. Anyone here owned by private equity? Or have customers owned by private equity?
Yes.
2, 3, 4. So 50% of my portfolio has some private equity investment. And we talk about M&A deals being, at an all-time high, and that is not stopping, especially now. There are deals to be found in the market, and your private equity firms and your investors are going to go get them. So think about what the private equity firm wants when they invested in your customer. Speak with their CTO, speak with their operating partners. They will have at least one person on board. Make sure you know what their agenda is. Because their agenda is going to be important in influencing what your customer invests in going forward. I'll end with another fun one. Sustainability. Anyone work with ESG type roles? Yeah? How do you do that?
In many varied ways. Specifically, our product is about, and our offering is about helping people find value from areas of their media coverage that they wouldn't necessarily be able to
Well said. Thank you. That's super helpful. I do a lot of transformation for my customers, help them modernize their services, build AI ML in. And as I do that, and it's often moving them away from technical debt and on-premise work. And I find that as I do that, I'm helping the ESG agenda of the company because I'm reducing the carbon footprint. So I've learned that the ESG person, who's generally a C-level report and influential, has a seat at the table for most of these decisions. And I've started to build relationships and engage this individual in. So they can sit at the table and force multiply what I'm trying to do and say, let's do that because that's going to tick multiple boxes. So look for roles. I have a core set of roles and I have an extended set of matrix. I call it my loose network and my strong network, what I work with every day. And we measure the heat map with colors, red, yellow, green, pick colors you love or like. And to me, this is one of the most important things in which I spend my time. Who am I speaking with? What is their agenda and how am I helping influence it? So that's customer value. Now let's look internally. How do we make it real? In my experience, almost everyone I speak with says, of course, we love customers. We want to do the right thing by them. Your product teams love them. Your engineering teams love them. Your legal teams love them. But the rubber meets the road when that intent and that, oh, I want to do something, translates into a programmatic way to execute on that intent. And that is where there's always work to be done, right? So with one customer, I keep picking on Zonos because Eric's sitting right here. Eric has a great experience at Zonos with AWS, but there may be another person at Zonos with whom we engage very, very differently. So how do you take intent, translate it into programs so you're consistently and efficiently delivering on your value and promise, regardless of a customer being in Turkey versus Singapore versus Utah? How do you show up the same way? And that then drives into creating culture. So it's not just you flying the customer flag all the time, but it's about the company helping you move the customer's agenda forward. And I'll give an example. Again, in my work, I help our customers make build or buy decisions. Do you build on AWS? Do you buy independently? One way to do that is they have to adopt new products. And when they think about, let's say, natural language or synthetic voice is a big trend, I bring in the service team to the customer. And the person who leads that service team and the people who coded that service are in a conversation with the customer. Not just once, but regularly. Every 3 months, it's called a quarterly roadmap meeting. And that's the mechanism by which we bring the customer and the service team together. What does that do? It does a couple of things, right? One, it does what you set out to do, which is build that roadmap. Your customer knows what you're building, you know what your customer wants to do, and it's this great bi-directional conversation. It helps your customer be efficient because they're not duplicating things that you might be doing. And it's starting to earn trust because you're sharing things. It also provides real-time feedback to your service teams because they hear firsthand from the customer. And their leader is sponsoring that customer, which means someone's butt's on the line here, right? They need to do a good job of it. They need to be responsive. They need to hear the feedback from the customer and actually process those requirements. That is how you take intent of customer obsession, translate it into a program, which we call roadmap transparency, and it becomes a culture of customer obsession across all teams. So regardless of who is adopting a service, you're showing up for that customer consistently because there's a programmatic way to do it. And so then you learn to make best friends. My product teams are my best friends. My sales teams are my best friends because you're better together. You have a value prop. Your 3 legs of the stool is how I talk about it, right? So you have your sales account leader who owns the relationship, owns that overarching conversation. Customer success delivers, provides the value, is the connective tissue, and you have deep product and technical expertise that you bring in to make sure that you're delivering that value to your customer. And we keep our best friends by having these mechanisms. So no one is surprised. People understand what the goals are. You carry common goals and accountability. The final piece of the scale piece is talent. How many of you lead teams here? So about half the room. How many of you want to lead teams? The whole room? This change right now is making me think more deeply about how I hire, how I onboard, who I hire, and how I deploy them. There are 3 things that have worked that I'll share here. And I'm happy, I want to understand what you are all doing that's working as well. The first thing is, we talked about this role still being shaped, which means that the bar to entry for a customer success role is fairly low. We don't ask for a PhD in neural networks to be a customer success engineer. At AWS, it's a technical role, which means I am a recovering engineer. I have a solution architect certification. All of my customer success teams have that certification. But generally, most people with a technical aptitude can get it. So what this has helped me do is think about broadening my aperture for who I hire. I have a program for military veterans to be customer success individuals, talent. Returning mothers. Mothers drop out of the workforce in huge numbers. The past 2 years, no surprises. We have a program to bring them back into the workforce. But also early in career college graduates. My best CSMs are my early in career graduates, right? Because they're truly obsessed, they have bias for action, they're willing to do the right thing, and they don't get fazed by the ambiguity of what's going on. So it's forced me to think about talent in a very distributed, diverse way. The second thing it's made me think about is, how do I scale with automation and tooling? I used my own AI services, and we've built a predictive tool that helps us anticipate next steps in the journey, where a CSM, where a customer success professional might be needed, how do we deploy them, how do we deliver resources, playbooks, assets. So digital scale to me is going to be the theme coming out of this set of economic activity. How do we scale customer success without having to deploy customer success individuals and still ensure a great relationship for our customer? The final piece is thinking about how do I more judiciously use my customers in a pooled model, in aggregate cohorts where I deploy them for specific industries or segments or customers, so I am making more out of what I have. And that's a challenge we will all get asked the question. Can you do more with what you have? These are my 3 ways in which I do more with what I have. So we've talked about value, we've talked about how we scale. Now we talk about when you do 1 and 2, you earn a seat at the table with your customer and internally to make the news. So I have a saying, which is, are you reporting the news or making the news? So all of us can show up and do our jobs, right? We have a contract that's signed, we have something to be delivered, and we can execute on it. The question is, are you just delivering on what has been set out, or are you actually helping the customer innovate? Do you have a seat at the table to co-innovate, to help them think about scenarios and help them look around the corner? And that's making the news. And for that, you have to think like owners, which means that you have to put yourself in the customer's shoes. So when that food delivery startup said, I want my customers to stay with me, not churn, not switch, we said, what would they need? What would that user experience look like? It also means you need instrumentation, back to what we talked about. You need data to be predictive and proactive, to do the breadcrumbs on what a customer needs, what patterns have worked for them, and what else will they need looking forward. And I believe the ones who show up with these options, right? I look at my data, I look at the patterns in the industry, I go into a customer with scenarios, and I say, I don't have a crystal ball, But here are 3 scenarios that we think will unfold for your business. This is a high, this is a medium, this is a low. Let's plan for them. And the minute you have that conversation, I've turned my relationship with my customer from a vendor contractual thing to a partnership, where my stakeholder goes, I get it. Like, this person actually cares that I'm successful. We come out of this successfully. Here's how we're going to think about it. There are lots of examples to help to talk about here. I'll wrap up by saying here are the 5 things. You will be in a lot of sessions, and at the end of the day, you will go, I have no idea what anyone said. Here are the 5 things to take away. Start with how the customer defines value, not a product or a service definition. Think like an owner. Think like you're a shareholder, a stakeholder of the customer to earn trust, to get the seat at the table. Start with intent, which is great, but scale by having programmatic approaches in place. I call those mechanisms, call something that works for your culture, but anytime you do one thing, say, can I scale that? How do I rinse and repeat that? Do it more efficiently, cheaper, faster, better. If you do those, you should move away from just sort of showing up and delivering the news to making the news. They will build with you. They will do things that they had not anticipated, maybe a partnership, maybe a co-solution. And at the end of it, it's patience, right? These are marathons, not sprints. We're not running 3-month sprints here. Our roles are about securing engagement and relationships long term. So think about that. When you're forced to think about the urgent versus important, fight hard to put on the important hat on and say, does it, in 2 years from now, will I still be able to have a conversation with the customer if I do these things? Thank you. Do we have time for Q&A?
Cool. So we had one question come through on Q&A. What is ESG?
Okay, let's start there. ESG is environmental, E is environmental, S is social, and G is governance. It's an acronym that captures a broad set of topics, from environmental, so sustainability, water conservation, thinking about carbon footprints are all, climate pledges go into that bucket. Social tends to be around workforce transformation. How do you invest in skilling and upskilling people? And governance tends to be rigorous board governance, rules, and policy. It tends to be a role that sits outside technology, generally on the board and as a direct report to the CEO. The CFO has a major role to play in it, but you will see increasingly, like Genesis has a global VP, their first global VP. Anyone from Genesis in this room? No, okay. They have their first global VP of ESG who owns all of this. So they have a very big stick. Here's what they miss. They miss a team to do the work, and that's where we can help them take their big stick and charter and convert it to business outcomes. You will earn their friendship and trust if you do that, and you have a powerful voice at the table.
And then any other questions coming through on Slido? I had one quick question. I was curious about how your team kind of works through the ambiguity of a customer's goals. So say, for example, a customer's goal falls off track for whatever reason, like they're behind for an internal reason that has to do with them. How does your team typically work through that?
Customer what?
So let's say, for example, a customer falls off of their timeline or their roadmap timeline due to whatever internal process they might have or whatever internal hang-up they might have. How does your team work through that?
Yeah, it's a great question. It happens all the time, right? Customers sign up for a contract. The person who signs is not the one doing the work, and you're going, I don't know. It may happen, may not happen. So multiple different things. I have a set of data, like key KPIs I track. And those KPIs will tell me in advance if we are going to meet that deadline or not. So I have an internal signal, right, that I can start to flag. And that starts driving conversations with customers. So as an example, one milestone could be assigning a partner to work on your transformation. You've missed the partner deadline, your final outcome is going to be missed. I'm going to start escalating internally.
Got it.
Second, we want to understand what's going on. Have you had an executive change? Have you had a change in priorities? Is there a third thing you want to talk about, right? So I seek to understand and problem solve and then see their way through it. Does it require investment? Does it require me pointing you to a certified partner? So it's a lot of problem solving and working with them. And of course, the third thing is, you sort of keep the conversation escalating through the leadership chain to make sure we get to a place that we all agree on.
Makes sense. Appreciate that. And it looks like we have a couple more questions coming through. So what if your customer does not have a clearly defined definition of success?
Yeah, and many times they don't, right? Because they're saying trying to pick an example that's public. Let's pick this, we want to expand to China. Or we want to, geo expansion is a big deal, right? We want to expand to Western Europe. And I start by going, well, it's at least 47 countries. Do you know where you want to start? And each country has separate compliance, and they've got EU laws and all of this. And so many times you should expect that your customer will not have a clearly defined definition of success. It is our jobs to get them there. And I use mechanisms, not a surprise. So I have an envisioning mechanism. So it's a visioning session, and you work through what their problem statement is, what goals are, what they are measured on to get to what good looks like. So you work on the definition with them.
Awesome. And then one more question. So how do you measure a CSM's attainment of customer-specific success criteria versus a retention metric on scale?
Yeah.
Oh, a couple more.
It's a good one. There's always art and science in success criteria. We have cohorts of customers that are similar, right? So I will say customers in X size, like X million to X million, Y million, in this stage of cloud maturity should have these type of things. I know that a customer in a scaling journey should have 12 advanced services. So if you're not at 12 or you don't have a path to get to 12, then we should talk about what else you're doing there. So we measure by cohorts, we measure by input activities as KPIs, and then the outcomes. We make sure every CSM has done all the input activities, because that's never up, that's not up for debate, but your outcomes may differ depending on the customer. So short answer is measure input activities, assign metrics by cohort, so you're measuring apples to apples, and I'm not comparing DoorDash to VMware, which are vastly different beasts.
Awesome.
Great customers, by the way, but just different, very different.
Awesome. I think that's all we have time for today, but
Okay.
thank you so much. Let's give another round of applause.